Oh my gosh, guess what? I got a 110% on my last project. Yeah, that's how much he liked it. Yeah. Anyways, this is a critical analysis project. This is my final project for my ancient culture class. I am covering the floating man argument by Avicenna. That's his Latin name. He has an Arabic name or something, but I can't pronounce it, so sorry. That's really too bad. Also, this video is scripted, so be happy that I won't ramble. I'm rambling right now, but look, the floating man.
Now here you go again. You say you want your freedom. Well, who am I to keep you down?
All right, focus up. Here it is. About to read it. Selections on the Floating Man by Avicenna, circa 1027. We say, if a human is created all at once, created with his limbs separated, and he does not see them, and if it happens that he does not touch them, and they do not see each other, and he hears no sound, he would be ignorant of the existence of the whole of his organs, but would know the existence of his individual being as one thing, while being ignorant of all the former things. What is itself the unknown is not the known. He will not doubt his affirming his self existing, but with this he will not affirm any limb from among his organs, no internal organ, whether heart or brain, and no external thing. Rather, he would be affirming his self without affirming for it length, breadth, and depth. And if in this state he were able to imagine a hand or some other organ, he would not imagine it as part of his self or a condition for his existence. You know that what is affirmed is other than what is not affirmed, and what is acknowledged is other than what is not acknowledged. Hence, the self, whose existence has been affirmed, has a special characteristic of being its very self, other than the body and organs that have not been affirmed. Hence, the one who affirms has a means to be alerted to the existence of the soul as something other than the body, indeed, other than the body, and to his being directly acquainted with his existence and aware of it. If he is oblivious to this, he would require educative prodding. Some people might hate that I'm going to do this, but I have some friends with very short attention spans. So, in Strawman Summary, a default spawn man is thinking of himself as a whole being even though he doesn't know about his body. He just knows. Okay? That's it.
Like a heartbeat as you make in the stillness of memory. What you had and what you lost.
Before I say what the point of this existing is, there's an academic paper by Ahmed Alwishah that lays the thesis of the floating man argument out in a nice premise conclusion format. And I want to lay that out too because that's important in philosophy. Yeah. Extracted from Avicenna on Floating Man Arguments by Ahmed Alwishah. F1. The floating man is aware of the existence of his self without being aware of the existence of his body. F2. The floating man affirms the existence of the self without affirming the existence of his body. F3. When the floating man is taken out of his body, all that's left is his self, which is affirmed in itself. Therefore, conclusion 1, rejecting the existence of his self is inconceivable, since it is necessary for his existence. C2. Rejecting the existence of his body is conceivable since it is not a necessary condition to affirm his existence. C3. Therefore, affirming the existence of the self without validating the existence of the body is conceivable. Now, see, the reason he keeps trying to break his self from our physical body is to indicate a soul. Wow, shocker. Yes, now you see, right? The floating man is an argument to prove a soul, in which he continually refers to the self synonymously with the soul, and then he just randomly drops the word soul once in at the end. Maybe that's something to do with the translation, but it feels unemphasized. And I'm leaving my personal opinion to these points on the end, but believe you me, I have some strong ones. But I'm going to define soul. I swear this is the last time I'm reading something before I start talking, okay? What a soul is, based on my own research. The majority of the population believe your soul is what creates, or is the same as, your consciousness, and is separate from your physical body, acting as a pilot, and contains your true self. Often, that is directly entailing that when one dies, it is separated from one's body and goes to an afterlife. Now, this paper is trying to communicate that humans have souls because one with no memories and sensory deprivation would still conceive self awareness. Note I grant Avicenna the word sensory deprivation because I don't think they had a concept of what that was and how to describe it in 1027 when this was written. Also, self awareness, because it's a snappy phrase, and they didn't really have that either. So, overall, the thought experiment is of good literacy quality. He went through many iterations to perfect it, as is shown in Alwishah's paper, and the analogy is very immersive. I feel like when you're reading it, you try and picture yourself in sensory deprivation. There's kind of a point to that, but it is a little repetitive. He does say the word affirmed 9 times. Um, we get it. It's affirmed. Okay, that's fine. Um, it's good writing. It is good writing.
When the rain washes you clean, you know.
So at the time, this was extremely original. Basically the first attempt to rationally argue for the existence of a soul, which is pretty much something people had taken for granted since the earliest civilizations of humans. I think of the Egyptians who were building massive dedications to the souls that were in the afterlife. You could say, oh, it wasn't necessarily a soul, but it had exactly the same concepts. I wonder though, and I haven't been able to figure who Avicenna was making this argument against. Who was doubting souls in the year 1000? Like, I just want to know. And if there wasn't anyone, don't you think even putting it up for discussion would make people start questioning? I'm just not sure how it was received back then, but I've heard Avicenna be called literally the best Islamic philosopher. So I suppose he's praised, at least to some extent, in sort of a modern context. I've also heard this called the best argument for a soul that's out there. People aren't gonna like that, but I've heard some people say it, okay? It's true that people think that. But how is it really affected modern times, though? I'm gonna be so honest right now. If you, on this very platform, youtube.com, go to the search bar and type in Avicenna floating man argument, at least half of what comes up is AI slop. The results corrupted. It's terrible. It makes you wonder if this had any social impact at all, or it was just a fun debate topic for philosophers. And then you have, the AI philosophy channels just jumping on it. Like, it's really a shame. I actually, in preparation for this project and out of slight curiosity, whatever, I went around bothering every single person I know and asking them, what do you think of souls? What do you think? And some of them, most of them were like, oh, you already know I don't like those, or you already know I believe in those. It's how I was raised. The majority, a good solid 80-ish% of the people I know said they do believe in souls, and when asked to explain why or elaborate, they would not and could not. Another 15% were undecided, and they're just, I don't know. I haven't thought about it. What even is that? There were a good amount of, I just feel like I have one. And then there was, 5% of people or whatever who said, that doesn't make any sense. You know, you know. All I'm saying is nobody pulled out the floating man thought experiment. That's just what I'm saying, okay?
Now here I go again. I see the crystal vision. I keep my visions to myself.
Listen, I've been giving you the informational bits for a while, but I need to go wild on this. I despise this argument, and I think it's a failure, a massive failure. And it's not necessarily because I disagree with the conclusion of the existence of souls. This argument is unsound, invalid, begs the question, and is rude. And frankly, in comparison to all other great philosophical works, ought to be scoffed at. In philosophy, an unsound argument is one with false premises, and an invalid argument is one with whose premises do not necessitate the conclusion. So like all of the premises can be true and the conclusion can still be false. That's invalid. I know there is one central false premise here for sure, and the fact that it's made is even patronizing to the reader. The floating man is aware of his existence, of his self, without being aware of the existence of his body. Hey man, question. How do you know that? Any evidence about that? No? You just think he would, huh? You just think so. And I can tell you why you're expected to accept this premise. Because you're supposed to project yourself onto this spawn man. And you think, well, if I couldn't feel my body, I'd still have self awareness. But guess what? It doesn't matter. You're not him, and no one's him, because a floating man with no memories is impossible. We know that. We don't know what he thinks. We don't know if he's self aware. Just saying that, isn't good enough. So here's an analogy that is real and possible to counter his. an infant, just born that millisecond, the only human on earth to truly have no memories. Oh, what about amnesia? I hear you saying. Well, amnesia isn't foolproof, right? They still have histories that they have built neural pathways and as a result of. So I'm not. We're not doing that. Anyway, an infant, get this, has zero self awareness, no concept of affirmed existence of his self, even in addition to having working senses and a knowledge of his own body. And it's still not like in religious narrative babies don't have souls, but Avicenna specifically said an adult regardless. If a baby doesn't have self awareness, why would a floating man with no memories have self awareness? This is where the invalidity of the argument comes forth. Specifically, there's an issue in which his premises establishes self-awareness and then immediately equals the soul. In every interpretation, this is not logically bridged. The line indicating self-awareness, therefore soul, cannot be accepted on its own merit. He doesn't even mention that the self is the soul until he shoehorns it in one of the very last sentences. And, I will at least give Avicenna the grace of not interpreting that he's saying self awareness is the same as a soul, in which the counterexample of the infant shatters already. Uh, I realize I realize this will likely be disagreeable to people, and this will be where people, hang up. But you can see very clearly in the text that nowhere does Avicenna justify why it is a soul that the man is aware of. Why would it be a soul? Why can't he just, have cognition? Whatever. I really cannot seriously consider this argument as anything other than the age old. I feel like I have a soul, and therefore I do. With the ridiculous addition of a floating man who would surely feel separate from his body too. Who is this floating man you made up to agree with you? He's not real, he'll never be real. When you look at Avicenna's argument itself, there's a very glaring logical circle. The floating man is aware of himself without being aware of his body. Therefore, he has a soul. Why is he aware of himself without being aware of his body? Because he has a soul. Why does he have a soul? Because he's aware of himself without being aware of his body. Why is he aware of himself without being aware of? How do we know he doesn't exist? How do we know he is? Oh, we know because he has a soul. I should have thought of that. Sorry. This argument drives me crazy. I just can't do it. Imagine if he just gets hungry. What if the floating man gets hungry? Then he's immediately alerted to the fact that he has a stomach and organs. So, how is he supposed to be unaware of his physical body? The moment he feels like an itch in his foot, he knows he has a foot. He has no memories. He has no memories. So he can't. How is he supposed to be thinking? Let alone self-aware. He doesn't even know what that means. Self-awareness is a learned behavior. Through mental development. How is he supposed to have mental development if he has no memories or no past? He can't develop. He just spawned in. There's so many problems. It doesn't work, guys. This argument doesn't work. Hey guys, why does he have a soul? Because he's self aware. Hey guys, why is he self aware? Because he has a soul. I can't do it. And just real quick at the end here, can we acknowledge that Avicenna is flat out rude and prissy? That last sentence, he would require educative prodding. Sounds like if you disagree with me, you're stupid. Which is ironic because it implies self awareness is a learned experience and therefore not inherent to a spawn man, or for that matter, a baby. Another text of his transcribed in Alwishah's analysis just ends with reflect further! Exclamation point, exclamation point. Like, chill out. Chill out. He's just saying, oh, if you really thought about it, you'd know I'm right. That's ick. I don't like that.
It's all in me who wants to wrap around your dreams and have you any dreams you like to sell. Dreams of loneliness like a heartbeat drives you back in the stillness of remembering what you had and what you love.
If you're curious on my take on the whole thing, I'm just gonna slide this in at the end. I don't think they're real. Shocker. I don't believe in free will and I'm a materialist. Of course I don't. I'm pretty sure souls are just something made up to excuse letting your true self go to an afterlife. Um, don't tell anyone I said that. I don't want the video to be disagreeing about that part. But I just think Avicenna's argument on its own legs is not not great.